Hello and welcome to another Restore Live, a Restore Live on a Wednesday evening and going out live right around the United Kingdom. And tonight we have a man who's no stranger to our screen, a man called Alistair McConaughey, a man that he runs a platform in Scotland called the Force for Good, and a man that's no stranger to having to fight tirelessly in order to defend the Union. Tonight we've sort of framed this stream in a way that what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at recently, just in the past few days, we had Nigel Farage with someone else's brain attached. He's asking for Tony Blair to take the reins in order to run the processes in terms of rolling out the inoculations right across the United Kingdom. Now, many of us know Tony Blair as a man that probably couldn't be trusted to, I don't know, brush your path outside or something. You know, I wouldn't even trust him with that. And I'm sure that plenty of people have reasons not to trust Tony Blair, is the truth of the matter. But just one wonders what's in Nigel's head. You know, as I say, did he have somebody else's brain attached? Has he been abducted? And maybe, I don't know, someone else got a mask on and taken control of his stream? Who knows? And we can explore that as the time goes on. And then I guess the next thing that we wanted to talk about, and this has to be something that we all talk about today, and that is that in America right now, I mean, America they're torn, some say down the middle, probably even worse than that. America's torn apart. And, you know, that land of the free, you know, I would suggest that if things go wrong this evening, it might not just be the land of the free that people have believed it to be in the past, and it could end up in a place whereby that America would be unrecognizable. Now, a lot of people, if you're looking at the mainstream media right now, you would be forgiven for understanding or thinking, if you listen to the talking heads on the media, you would be forgiven for thinking that Donald Trump and his supporters have, they've taken leave of their senses. But whenever you examine what the media is not telling you, whenever you look right across the board, whenever you look at the evidence, there's no doubt that there was mass voter fraud in America. And, you know, whenever I think about the strapline from America that would come from the Declaration of Independence, and it talks about is it life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? I had to think about that, but that's what it talks about. It talks about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And right now, I mean, as for many Americans, they would tell you that it's not life as they know it. And in terms of liberty, well, liberty has definitely been taken away in that land of the free. And without liberty, you can't have the pursuit of happiness. So it's a big night. It's not just a big night for America, if you watch what's going on in America, but it's certainly a big night for the Western world also, as we know it. And, you know, like many conservative organizations down throughout the years, what you'll notice if you're watching what's happening in America right now is that, you know, it's just typical of conservatives, and what they have a tendency to do is they stood by Trump right across, you know, for those last 4 years. And, you know, a lot of them fought with him, but in the background, there's a lot of them that are sniping. There's a lot of them that's wanting rid of Trump. There's a lot of them that's wanting to tear Trump down. And, you know, you just see them, they're like rats in the gutter. And I guess it's, you know, it's maybe the same as our own conservative parties here. They're just like rats in the gutter, that are jostling for their own position, that are getting their own feet under particular tables. And, you know, the type of people that care for themselves and that don't actually care for the people. And this evening, if you're watching the media and what's happening in America, what you will notice is the media are literally putting the people down. You know, the ordinary people who went to the polls, who placed their vote, who weren't involved in voter fraud, and who believe that their democracy is being stolen right from under their very noses. And that has huge implications, not only for America, but that has huge implications for people right across the Western world. So I would like to start this evening by just playing you a little video. Now, this is going back to what I had suggested about Nigel Farage. And, you know, as I say, one would wonder, when you see this video, one would wonder, has someone taken control of Nigel Farage, his social media? Is someone holding him at gunpoint and making him say these things? Who knows? But anyway, we'll let you make your own decision. We'd just like for you to play, we'd like to play this little video. And when we come back, we'll have Alistair on the screen. I'll make a comment, and then we'll put it over to Alistair also to make a comment. So without any further ado, Nigel Farage with someone else's brain.
I do not agree with so much of what Tony Blair stood for. Not just Iraq, Europe, many other things. If ever there was a moment to call for a government of all the talents, much as I don't like Tony Blair, he does get things done. He does command respect. He is seriously bright. Why not get people like Tony Blair involved to help us solve a national crisis?
Why not get somebody like Tony Blair involved to help us solve a national crisis? Now, Alistair, before I'm just going to turn the sound down here so that I don't sort of come back on myself. Before I sort of go into letting you comment about Tony Blair, and this is for the people that's watching also, I would like just to play a little short clip of Tony Blair. Now, Tony Blair, he made this video, I think it was March or April time last year. And if you listen to Tony Blair talking about the Blair Institute, now let me just tell you about institutes held by other people. I mean, there's the Clinton Foundation, and there's various other institutes around the world. And Tony Blair has modelled himself on his friends. And his friends are what we've learned, especially in Northern Ireland, with the likes of the Clintons and the Clinton Foundation and the people that they associate with. Well, you see, Tony Blair would have made friends with the Clintons quite some time ago. And, I'm sure that there's a lot of us right now, just especially over the last couple of years, you'll note that the Clintons, there's a lot of questions, I would say, to be asked of the Clintons without getting into what it is that they're involved in and have been involved in over the years. I mean, one of the stories that I'll tell you about Bill Clinton before I play this to do with Tony Blair before we move on, is that in 1995, December 1995, Bill Clinton stood at the Belfast City Hall, and Bill Clinton said to the people of Northern Ireland that isn't it great that you can place the past behind you, and blessed be the peacemakers was the strapline that he used. And he says that you need to reach out into the other community, you need to embrace the IRA terrorists, and you need to embrace each other and make amends for all the bitterness and the hatred of the past. And whilst Bill Clinton was asking the people of Northern Ireland to do that in September of 1995, well, Bill Clinton not long after went back into America, and there was a time in American history known as what happened was the Oklahoma bomb. And whenever Bill Clinton went back to America, I remember as a young man looking at Bill Clinton with a very, thinking that what a hypocrite, because he went back to America and he made a speech. And he said in this speech that I will leave no stone unturned until I find who done this. And they did find who done this, and they found a man called Timothy McVeigh. And what happened to Timothy McVeigh was that they executed Timothy McVeigh with lethal injection. So I always found Bill Clinton and the Clintons and anybody that surrounded them to be they were hypocrites, total, outright and utter hypocrites. And Tony Blair, I would measure alongside the likes of the Clintons, and I make no apology, absolutely no apology for pointing at Tony Blair and saying, again, has Nigel taken leave of his senses? Because I wouldn't trust Tony Blair with anything British, with anything to do with, helping anything out in this country, because Tony Blair doesn't have the interest of the United Kingdom at heart. Tony Blair, he's done nothing but rack and ruin and put in place mechanisms which has been proven to rack and ruin in the future. And that's my measure of Tony Blair as a man. So let's just play Tony Blair. I'll come back. Sorry about this, Alistair. I'll make a comment on it, and then I'll go over to you and ask you to give your take on what you've just seen.
So we in the Institute are doing two things. First of all, we're supporting governments in how they organise themselves. This requires you to put aside all the normal rules of bureaucracy and government and organise government in a completely new and different way for greater heft, for greater efficiency, for greater effect. So we're working with governments to show them the types of reorganisation they require within government in order to make that effective. Secondly, we're working on policy solutions, trying to show governments what is the best practice around the world, where we can, help them with the sourcing of vital material and equipment, protective suits, masks, ventilators, testing equipment, all of that absolutely necessary. Thirdly, to look at the tech innovations that can help, those things that might help governments track the disease more effectively, be able to identify the hotspots in order better to defeat the spread of the disease, and finally, the right type of community organisation. This is going to require the whole of the community to be organised, particularly once we get to the stage where we're trying to restart economies without further outbreaks of the disease. So our teams in all the countries in which we work, there's around about 25 different countries with whom we have connections or have teams. Our teams are staying in country, in place, in line to do whatever we can to help. And we as an institute and our 250 odd staff are there ready to do whatever we can do.
Yeah, there's just two things I'd say about that, and that's, I'm going to mention one phrase and I'll mention another and it'll be straight over to you, Alistair. But weapons of mass destruction is one phrase which is synonymous with Tony Blair. And another one is the persecution and the prosecution of the veterans in Northern Ireland. And this is where Tony Blair made deals with terrorist organisations outside of processes, under the table, behind the door. And what he did was that, he even gave the terrorists immunity from prosecution. And that's what he did. Whilst today, they still don't come out and say that, hold on a wee minute. It was never meant that the veterans were going to be prosecuted if the terrorists were permitted to get out of jail and if they were permitted to lead a normal life free from prosecution. But you see, that measures Tony Blair in my mind, and maybe Nigel Farage doesn't know that. And Alistair, I know a lot of people throughout the UK. They have a respect for Nigel Farage. I have my own thoughts, and and I'm not going to sort of. Whenever I do describe Nigel Farage, just a wee bit later on in the debate here or the stream, in no way is this a reflection on you. I'll have my rant, and you can have your own thoughts about Nigel. But look, over to you, and I'll go to the live chat, Alistair.
Absolutely, John, and thanks for having me on again. I watched that video of Nigel. I think it was with growing incredulity, growing disbelief. You mentioned that maybe somebody has hijacked his brain or put in the brain of another person or something like that, or maybe his brain has been hacked in some way. You've heard of Twitter. He can't really say my Twitter feed has been hacked, but he might be able to say my brain has been hacked. But I should say I have great respect for Nigel Farage. I used to know him when I was a member of UKIP way back almost 20 years ago. I think he's a great guy. I think he's responsible largely for delivering Brexit. Without him, it's very likely that he would not have been able to persuade a lot of people, especially in the northern constituencies and also here in Scotland, to vote, because he brought in a much stronger angle about the Brexit debate. He was pushing the anti-globalism and the pro-immigration control and stuff like that. And those were the policies that swung the Brexit debate towards leave. And if it hadn't been for him, then we probably would not have won the Brexit vote. So I think the country's forever in his debt in that sense. And what on earth has got into him about this? Not only is he promoting Tony Blair here, he's also promoting mass vaccination, which of course is another controversial issue that many people have their own opinions about. And not everybody is a fan of max vaccinating the population, and certainly not putting Tony Blair anywhere near a needle. You know, you talk about weapons of mass destruction. I think this could be like his needles of mass destruction in a way. That no, you wouldn't trust Tony Blair with to run a bath, as you implied there as well, and I totally agree. And you certainly don't put him in charge of doing that. And I just watched that video there of him describing his organisation, whatever it was. Oh my goodness me, that's just some kind of globalist organisation there, which is capitalising for the moment on the COVID situation and using it as a way to basically bring governments throughout the world together towards promoting one kind of policy. What was he said? What was it he said? Supporting governments in how they organise themselves, which is in other words, let's all organise to do the same thing that my Tony Blair organisation has decided is best for you. That's essentially what that's about. It's just a kind of another globalist trick. And it looks like they're probably going to get into the field of virus control. And this will be a new way moving forward of basically controlling or dominating, shall we say, dominating government responses worldwide to every single new virus which comes up. And as we know, new viruses arise every 3 or 4 years with just naturally, you know. So this is a way of using that natural phenomenon of new viruses to actually bring governments together. It's just another form of globalist control led by Tony Blair. And if you put him in charge of some kind of mass vaccination program throughout the United Kingdom, I think it would be a bad lookout for us. Nigel did mention a good point that I'm sympathetic with. He talked about a government of the talents, which I like that in the sense of there's lots of good people and wise people in different political parties, and in some cases they can put aside, and maybe perhaps in some cases they could put aside their various disagreements in order to maybe deliver things. I always think about the government during the war, the wartime coalition, and Churchill appointed a Scottish Labour man to be the Secretary of State for Scotland, and he was perfect for the job, and he got the job done during the war here in Scotland, and he also kick-started lots of big infrastructure programs. So that was a good government of the talents right then. But we have to be careful about going too far with it. But in principle, I can see the idea of a government of the talents working to an extent on certain issues. But I'd certainly be very sceptical about Tony Blair being involved now. I mean, he is yesterday's man, and yesterday we don't look back on him fondly. As you said there in that video, I mean, does he have massive respect? Maybe some Labour Party diehards think he's the bee's knees, but for most people, I don't think he brings up particularly pleasant memories. And the war on Iraq, of course, was something that he's remembered for. And it was the war on Iraq here in Scotland that really lost the Labour Party a lot of support. You know, we actually had a vote in Holyrood back then, and Holyrood was dominated by the Labour Party, and they actually voted in support of the war on Iraq. So the war on Iraq was one of Labour's big downfalls, and of course it was just Tony Blair going along with the globalist agenda that wanted to destroy various Arab nations. So basically, Nigel, come on. I don't know what you've been drinking, or if you're going stir crazy or something like that. I know lockdown is getting to a lot of us, but come on, man. You know, you can't be saying that. You're gonna have to do a mea culpa, I think, in your next video, and say, sorry, mate, I had a bad hangover and I wasn't thinking correctly, and I may have said a few things out of turn, but I misspoke. I think that's how Nigel has to deal with it. You know, but deal with it, he's going to have to.
Well, that's a definite. Look, I mean, there's something on the screen there from Stephen Crosby. Is Nigel the face of controlled opposition? Blair is a globalist. Well, look, I mean, Stephen, you probably know my thoughts on that, and I think I've extended in length to you what it is that I know. And I'm going to take you back. And as I say, Alistair, this is no reflection on you or anybody that looks up to Nigel Farage. But for quite some time, I've been looking at Nigel, and I've looked at everything that he has done. And every time that he's get very, very close to actually doing something proper for and on behalf of the United Kingdom, or for and on behalf of the people, the genuine people that love Britishness, that love the United Kingdom, that cherishes their national identity and everything that goes with it, that, you know, every time he's get really, really close to closing something, he's walked away. And, you know, what do I mean? Well, you know, let's take whenever he delivered the Conservatives to the position where David Cameron had to give a Brexit referendum. And he'd done that. And, you know, on the day, really, when David Cameron sort of stood down and Nigel walked away from UKIP, you know, I just say to myself that I mean, that was the end of the beginning, not the beginning of the end. Because although that the vote was delivered, and we all seen how that the media went into overdrive, and the media started to talk about, well, you know, that democracy didn't end. Democracy hasn't ended. You know, it's not the end of everything. What we need to reverse this vote. Now, if it had went in way or by way of the EU, well, they wouldn't have been talking about that. You would have never got a vote again. That would have been settled and buried and end of story. But you see, Nigel effectively walked away, and there was a man called Gerard Batten that took up the baton, you know, on the UKIP party. And UKIP was left, and anybody could challenge me on this, because I have an interview where I done with Nigel, or with Gerard Batten, and still have it in a little file there, where we were told that Nigel left the UKIP party in financial difficulties. And how that they put themselves right was that they invited in a lot of membership through a street movement that occurred right throughout the United Kingdom, and with the Football Lads Alliance that came to prominence at the time. And they brought themselves in an awful lot of money, and they paid the debts off, and UKIP were actually looking up, and things were happening, and they were getting people elected. In fact, we had a man on our screen just a few weeks ago from Newcastle upon Tyne who was elected through the UKIP party in and around that time. And what actually happened is that whenever UKIP rectified themselves and put themselves on an even keel in terms of financial stability, Nigel Farage done nothing but attack those people. Now, I asked the question that if he walked away, he should have walked away, and he should have left them alone to do a good thing. And then what he did was he then started to attack the type of people that were following UKIP. And he was calling the followers of UKIP tattooed, knuckle-dragging skinheads. Do you know, I mean, what sort of, I don't know, I mean, if you walk away, you walk away. You don't slander people. You don't, and you know, and if Nigel Farage didn't want to be any part of UKIP, well, in my honest opinion, he just should have walked away, and he should have left it. Now then, the next session that I seen with Nigel was the Brexit party. Now, at a time whenever the nation they were looking at the Conservatives, they were looking at the Labour Party. You know, this is the time frame when Anna Soubry's of this world and, you know, other people within politics were literally tearing things down and tearing things apart and standing against everything Brexit and averting Brexit at every turn through the Parliament. But you see, they then started this Brexit party. And the Brexit party, it came to prominence fairly quickly. I mean, it was a gouche and a rush of people that went and supported the Brexit party, and they delivered the Brexit party in huge numbers back in the European elections. And they sent MEPs back in their droves back into Brussels. And, you know, that was the Brexit party that you know, were probably what the people were looking for right then and right there. And then came the time of the national election on the 6th of December in 2019. And I know that date very well, Alistair, because we rallied for our own DUP here. It was the 12th of December in 2019. And what happened, now I know this firsthand, and again, I can say to anyone to challenge me on this fact, But you see, I'm privy to the information that there was a deal done with Nigel Farage to stand aside, to step aside, and to allow the Conservative Party to go for the power. Now, there was a judgment to be made there, and I'm not about to say that there wasn't, because did the Brexit Party split the vote and allow, say, the Labour Party to get in? And that was it was an election of great. I mean, they needed as many people returned into Westminster as possible. But you see, I know of that deal. I know of the deal that Nigel Farage done. And in fact, I was told, and we'll just watch for this coming in the future, but I was told by a man that was very close to Nigel that he had done this on the promise of a lordship. Now, was he going to take his lordship? Well, no, he wasn't. Apparently what he was going to do, he was going to take the lordship, okay, but the title, and he was going to go off and he was going to do media in America. And that's what I was told that he had in mind at the time, and that was by somebody that was very, very close to him. So I've always looked at Nigel with a very sceptical eye, because each and every time that he came close to actually delivering for the people and getting rid of the elites within Westminster, and he could have done it twice, but he didn't do it. He didn't do it. He walked away each time. Now, whenever I now look at what I seen here with Tony Blair, and as I say, Alistair, this is no reflection on you. You don't have to to subscribe to what I'm saying, but I have to get this off my chest because I know of it. And even what he said about Tony Blair, has Nigel been bought? Is Nigel the type of man that would do things? There's a song, and I'm going to use my singing voice here, but it's a song, I think, from the 70s, Alistair.
Oh, yeah.
It might be from the 80s, but it goes, I'm only making plans for Nigel. Who remembers that song? I hope I sang that right, but there is a song, and I believe that Nigel is only making plans for Nigel. And has Nigel been promised his feet under the globalist table, along with one Anthony Blair and Bill Clinton and co? Well, that's my theory. You don't have to subscribe to it, but that's my take again on Nigel Farage. So, Alistair, what I would like to do again here, and let's go back to Tony Blair for a moment, and let's just play this little video clip again, and we'll examine his words, and we'll come back, and I'll give a wee bit about it, and we'll, you give your take on it. We're going to ask a few questions to the live chat here. So back over to Tony Blair again.
So we in the Institute are doing two things. First of all, we're supporting governments in how they organise themselves. This requires you to put aside all the normal rules of bureaucracy and government and organise government in a completely new and different way, for greater heft, for greater efficiency, for greater effect. So we're working with governments to show them the types of reorganisation they require within government in order to make that effective. Secondly, we're working on policy solutions, trying to show governments what is the best practice around the world, where we can, help them with the sourcing of vital material and equipment, protective suits, masks, ventilators, testing equipment, all of that absolutely necessary. Thirdly, to look at the tech innovations that can help, those things that might help governments track the disease more effectively, be able to identify the hotspots in order better to defeat the spread of the disease, and finally, the right type of community organisation. This is going to require the whole of the community to be organised, particularly once we get to the stage where we're trying to restart economies without further outbreaks of the disease. So our teams in all the countries in which we work, there's around about 25 different countries with whom we have connections or have teams. Our teams are staying in country, in place, in line to do whatever we can to help. And we as an institute and our 250 odd staff are there ready to do whatever we can do.
Yeah, what I noticed about what Tony was saying there, he says that we need to set aside all the normal bureaucracy.
Yes.
And what does that mean? Does that mean like overstep democracy? Does that mean put in place or remove people's freedoms? Does that mean removing protests? Does that mean, that seems to be what the world governments are doing. What they're doing worldwide. And then whenever we look at these institutes, that was the Blair Institute that I took that video from. But, we've got the Bill Clinton Foundation, we've got the George Mitchell Institute for Global Peace, and we'll talk about him in a minute. And that's Tony Blair's friend, by the way, as is Bill Clinton's friend. Then we've got the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And then we've got the Open Society and Open Democracy. These are the George Soros groups. And these people, they seem to be working with governments. As Tony Blair said, there are 25 different countries. And he talked about having in place the right type of community group. I wonder what that meant.
Did you notice that? He said the right type of... What he said, the whole of the community has to be organised when we're trying to restart the economies after the virus, whatever the community is, because these guys, they love talking about the community without realizing that, some communities are not necessarily wanting to work with each other, as many of us know. So it's all just a clever modern governance speak, which is used. But what disturbs me when I listen to that is his institute has 250 odd, he said, 250 odd, and odd is the operative word there, 250 odd employees. Yeah. I mean, these are people being paid a wage to basically mess up this country. And as you named the Open Society, and there's lots of these big organizations that are funded by billionaires, and they're throughout the world, and so many of our politicians are caught up in it as well. And we look tonight over at America, and a lot of the people in Congress and in the Senate, they're all caught up in these organizations as well, and they're not wanting to listen to the patriotic pro-sovereignty movement. Their heads are completely in this global governance mentality. And we've left the EU, but what good is that if all our politicians are totally in the bag of a globalist structure? And you may as well be in the EU almost, because your politicians are not exercising national sovereignty. They're exercising some kind of new concept of global governance, where there are no such things as separate nations. And Tony Blair is leading and has always led that globalist charge, along with the other odd people who presently misgovern us. So we should always just look through all that flowery language and basically see it for the language that it is, which is the language of global government, not national government. Yeah. And definitely he's in there using the virus threat, which will be ongoing forevermore, because there's always going to be viruses. He's seeing that as a way to get into governments and to make them all think the same and act the same. And that's not necessarily correct. We shouldn't all be acting and have the same response to the virus, because the virus is going to affect different people in different countries in different ways.
Yeah. Indeed. Well, you see, I mean, he also talked about, he was talking about things that has unfolded over time. And probably if you were watching close enough, you would have seen this from the start of the pandemic in March, is that, who didn't know that we were going to be locked down come September again? Who didn't know that we were going to be locked down come after Christmas again? Who doesn't know that we're going to be maybe let out again, maybe April, May time? And who doesn't know that next September, the following December, because this is what happens when viruses do the rounds every year, even prior to this plague that is currently doing the rounds. And, if I'm reading this right, and this is for the people that's on the live chat as well as yourself here, Alistair, but I'm looking at them, they want to reduce carbon emissions by 7% a year. And they said last year in the lockdown that they managed their 7%. So, and they said that from 2020 to 2030, they needed to reduce this carbon emissions by 70%. So if you do the division, do the maths, that's 7% a year. That means that this is the new normal between now and 2030. So for anyone that's living on the thoughts that if we leave it to our governments, and if there's not an uprising of the people, against all this removal of freedoms. And, you know, if there's not an uprising of the people, then this is the new normal between now and at least 2030. And goodness knows where it will be by then. But
Well,
that's
I think we're seeing it. I think we're seeing an uprising of some people tonight in Washington D.C. crying out loud. That's an uprising of sorts. I don't know where that's going to go or what's going to happen with it, but that's certainly a movement.
Yeah,
upwards.
That's a definite, Alistair. Alistair, just one more thing I would like to play here, and then we'll move on to America. And then don't get me wrong, we'll want you to talk about Scotland at the very end and tell everyone from a man from Scotland what's happening. I mean, they're sick listening to Northern Ireland with me, giving it my full go. But anyway, here we go. I just wanted to play this other little video. And this was something I found I'm done with my rant about Nigel, but I find whenever you look between what Nigel's saying, you get the reality of what Nigel's saying. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in between, and then there's a lot of the juice. There's a lot of the juicy bits, let's just say. So I'm going to play another video here that I've played in the last couple of occasions when we've done the live feed. But Alistair, this is for your own benefit here, just to let you see how good of a Brexit deal that Nigel actually thinks that this is.
I should, of course, tonight be filled with joy and elation that we've actually left now the single market, the customs union, we've left it all behind. But it's not joy because there are aspects of this deal that really are dreadful. The first, of course, is Northern Ireland. You know, we've put a part of the United Kingdom into a different constitutional arrangement to the rest of us. Northern Ireland has almost been hived off. And I think the consequences of doing that are going to make the battle to keep Scotland part of the UK just that little bit more difficult. It's going to add fuel to the fire that Nicola Sturgeon is building. The worst part of the deal for me is fisheries. I said at the time of the referendum and in the immediate aftermath that fisheries would be the acid test of Brexit. And I'm afraid the deal is shocking. Yes, we get back a little bit more quota over the course of the next 5 years. But the Prime Minister today just did not tell the truth in the House of Commons. Now, whether he has been badly briefed, whether he's actually read the document himself, I simply don't know. But he says after 2026, you know, we become an independent coastal state fully. The adjustment period, as they're now calling this, will be over, and we can catch all the fish we want. Oh, no, we can't. We may call ourselves an independent coastal state. Monsieur Barnier may acknowledge we're an independent coastal state, but we still don't own the fish that swim within our exclusive economic zone. And after 2026, we will not be making sovereign decisions on who can catch what in British territorial waters. And I'm afraid, to increase our quota share after 2026, we would actually have to pay compensation to the EU fleet. That's us paying them for our fleets to catch our fish in our waters. Surely it should be the other way round. They should be paying us to fish in our waters. So I think the fisheries aspect of this is little short of a humiliation. And perhaps the other point to note is that financial services, Britain's biggest industry, the sector in which we actually trade at a surplus with the European Union, doesn't really get a mention. There are no agreements at all for services like financial services. So we have a deal that is good for BMW, good for the champagne makers, and good too for British exporters to Europe in the sense that there's no tariff, in the sense that there's no quota, but nothing for Britain's biggest individual industry.
whenever you cut between the lines of what Nigel's actually saying, and whilst he was celebrating having Brexit delivered, well, that's exactly what he was saying in between those lines, Alistair. That, we all know that it's not a perfect deal. And if you're living in Northern Ireland right now, it's an absolute disastrous deal. And one of the things that, again, from a Northern Ireland standpoint, that we're looking at, and I was on your show pre-Christmas there, and I was saying that they're going to hive us off, and it's drastic implications for us. And I actually see this, and this is me going back a long time in politics. But in 1990, we had a Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, a guy called Peter Brooke, who said that Britain has no selfish strategic or economic interest in Northern Ireland. And the then Secretary of State in '93, Patrick Mayhew, he also used those words. And ever since then, we have been incrementally having our Britishness and our linkage with the United Kingdom whittled away. And whilst our politicians tell us that that's not the case, well, what they are doing is they are facilitating it, and they're not really telling the people the truth of the matter. But I guess like Nigel and like the Democrats or like the Republicans at the minute in America, it's all leaving Trump and leaving, they're like rats in a gutter, they're all turning on each other. Again, we've seen that so many times with our conservative groupings and conservative parties throughout the United Kingdom, and it beggars belief that that's the way that it is. United we stand. We really need to. Sometimes I think, Alistair, that we probably have to be on our knees and be on our knees properly before a real fight back begins. And I have to say, I don't think that we're very far to go until we are that way, is the truth of the matter. What do you think of what Nigel had just said, Alistair?
Well, talking about just what the last thing you said there about being on your knees, even if you're on your knees, you're not necessarily going to fight back unless you're organised and you've got proper leadership. And so entire people can be beaten quite unjustly unless they have organisation and leadership. So that's what it comes down to. So that's maybe what's missing at the moment as well, is the leadership that can stand up for the union in this way. And you and I and others do our best with what we've got in the situation. What do I think of Nigel's speech? I think one or two of the things he said there are absolutely correct. There are bad elements of the deal around fishing, especially here in Scotland. They've kicked the can or the cod or whatever 5 years down the road when they're going to revisit it and rejig it. But, by that time, don't think that all these other foreign fishermen are going to go, oh yeah, 5 years is over. We've had our time now and we're quite happy just to give you guys the whole seas if you want. No, it'll just be another big fight and a big argument, and there'll be some other kind of fudged deal will come out of that. So the fishing thing is a problem. The Northern Ireland thing, of course, as you know very well, is a very, very serious problem as far as the United Kingdom is concerned. And there's other elements there. The only sort of saving grace is that at least we can go about and say that, well, we got a deal, and that softens it in a way, in the sense that if there had been no deal, the Scottish nationalists and so on would be having an absolute conniption fit at the moment. So it's very difficult for them to really argue too much, because at least there is a deal. But that's really the only thing. And we have to hope that as we move forward in the coming years, that better leaders and better ideas especially will arise and will somehow be able to enforce it. Because let's remember, at the moment, these deals were being made by a political establishment that didn't want Brexit in the first place. So these people are making deals against their better judgment. They don't even want to be in that situation. They argued against that situation. And I'm talking about like the whole civil service establishment and most of the people in the major political parties. They're all against having to do this anyway. So they're going into these deals, with both arms tied behind the back, really, and their heart's not in it, their head's not in it. So they're not going to make ideal decisions and ideal deals. So it's going to take a little bit of a while before the revolution works through to the front. It's certainly here in this country. It seems to be moving faster in the USA, but time will tell after tonight.
Yeah. And under the USA, I mean, I've been watching Al Jazeera there for the few hours before we come on here, and the reason why I was is I've been watching things really from last evening and trying to understand what's happening in America right now. And you're so right when you say, Alistair, and we're back into the UK for a moment, and Scotland and England and Northern Ireland and Wales, and even in Ireland for that matter, is that the politicians have absolutely lost touch with the people. And the people, they want their nationality kept. They want their, they want borders, and they want, a nation state, and they want to maintain it that way. Because whenever you have a nation state, whenever you have government close at home, what you can do is that if there's any problems, you can change things. But whenever that government goes off to be it the EU, or whenever it goes off to globalization per se, you have absolutely no chance of changing things. And all the shouting, all the protesting in the day, it won't change anything, and that's a huge problem where I see for globalization. So I would always be a man that would actually promote and fight for and stand up for protecting the borders, because democracy requires borders, and protecting the nation state. And whenever we cross over the pond, I mean, it was often said that if America sneezes, the rest of the world catches a cold. And as I've grown older, I began to realize that isn't that the truth. Isn't that the truth? Because a lot of things, I mean, one of the good things that Brexit, I guess, Alistair, has done for us, and not just Brexit, but even this pandemic as it has unfolded, is it has opened our eyes, and it has opened a lot of people's eyes to what is actually going on in the background. And it's not hidden anymore. I mean, there's bold as brass. You hear Blair, jostling for position and saying that he's working with 25 different countries, and they've got the right type of community organisations in every country. And by the way, he's talking about NGOs, non-governmental organisations, which is paid by the likes of your sources, which is paid by these foundations, which gets funding from different bodies, different groups, globalists per se, whether that be the European Union, and the money is ploughed into these organisations. And we see it happening in Northern Ireland, you see it happening in Scotland, you see it happening in Ireland, you see it happening in Wales, you see it happening in England. And what these people are being paid for is to be an opposition to the nation state, an opposition to the country in which they live.
Exactly.
And who would
to be
have
seditious?
Absolutely. And you see, and this is the type of community organisation that Blair is talking about. And this is the type of government that permits those community organisations to be in place to be opposition to themselves. And what type of a recipe for disaster is that? And that's happening in the USA right now. I mean, looking at Al Jazeera over the last few hours, I mean, I see that they were debating what was happening in the Senate. And and people have ascended upon Washington D.C. All the people that supported Trump and the Republicans, and they're livid. They're livid. They really think that whether it hasn't. I mean, we don't have the evidence of that, but certainly we can look at what people are saying and what people are protesting about, and they're saying that their democracy is being stolen. They're saying that the votes were rigged, that there was these machines that were perhaps hacked and changed, and there was voter fraud in huge numbers where people were turning up to claim their vote, and their vote had already been taken. And there was people, I mean, some of the states, they had more voters than they had people, and I don't know how that happens. So there's huge questions to be asked in America right now over how that vote took place. And isn't it interesting that the Democrats, the people attached to your Hillary Clintons of this world and your Joe Bidens of this world, they fought Trump for ever since the day of the election when Trump won, and they never stopped fighting with one problem after the next. And now they're saying that isn't it time to unite America. In fact, a few weeks ago, whenever Biden and Kamala Harris, whenever they had nominated themselves president and vice president-elect, the officer of the president-elect. Whenever they done that, that was the first time in a very long while that I seen them, that they had the Star-Spangled Banner flying, and the American flag all of a sudden was in fashion again, because they had it. But whenever Trump had it, it was to be burnt, it was to be trashed, it was to allow the newcomers to tear it apart and to absolutely defile the flag. And I'm going to say this, but no country's flag should be treated in that way, and it should be a criminal offence for anyone to treat a flag in that way. Who remembers the newcomer to our country? Or maybe it wasn't a newcomer, but certainly the person that was setting the light to the flags at the Cenotaph in the summer. Do you know what I mean? There should be huge penalties for things like that. And in fact, if it was the other way around, if it was an indigenous folk burning another country's flag and some newcomer was offended by it, well, you see, the indigenous folk would go to jail for that, and go to jail for a very long time. And that's the unfairness of our system. And that's the unfairness of, this is the truth, this is what's coming out of America. Because these rules, these regulations, these laws, these new fads, these ideologies, they are being driven from America. And then, you see, what has happened is that people within our countries, they have teamed up, they have joined up with a globalist ideology. And within this ideology, I often say that they team together in order to derail our successes. And, we haven't quite managed to team up. Why? Because, you see, there's too many people that are leading us, that are in leaderships in our countries, whether that be Boris Johnson, whether that be in Northern Ireland, this is our own DUP, whether that be right now in America. There's too many people that are ready to jump ship, like rats leaving the sinking ship. There's too many people ready to jump ship and join with their opposition in order that they're okay in the future. And that's the problem right now with the conservative movement, Alistair. There's too many of them people in leadership roles right now.
Oh, very much so. And that's especially the case in the USA, where if you become a senator or a congressman or woman, you have a very cushy existence, and you become part of the furniture. You move in, and all the ideals that you had initially, you realize, well, I'm just going to really have to get along here. And if I get along, everything's going to be okay. And I watched Donald Trump's speech this afternoon from Washington, D.C. in front of a very, very big crowd. And he did run through a lot of clear areas where there has been procedures that are simply not constitutional or legal, and he listed them all off, or at least some of them, and he didn't even get into the voting machines. He was just simply talking about the provable ballot fraud on things like, for example, there was 205,000 more ballots than official voters in the state of Pennsylvania. Now, that can be, properly calculated. Now, you cannot, therefore, allow that to stand. You just can't. And he was very clear, Trump was very clear, that Pence had to use his constitutional authority as vice president to say that he was not having it, basically. And what did he say? He said that Pence needs to stand up, and if you don't, I'm going to be very disappointed in you. And that's a direct quote. And then he added, he goes, but I'm not hearing good stories. So it seemed that he knew that Pence wasn't going to stand against these states where it can be proven that there's sufficient dodgy votes and procedures that if you discounted them, Trump would have won. And so Pence certainly let down the side this afternoon, and that's why you're seeing all of this commotion that's going on outside, and some of it actually inside the Capitol building at the moment. Because, you spoke earlier there about the importance of national governments not being submitted to things like the EU and so on. But for each of us as individuals, the thing that's extremely important for our own personal sovereignty is the vote. And each of us only gets one vote. And if it is clear that, for example, in Georgia, 10,000 people who are dead voted, then what it's basically saying is that your democracy does not work. Yeah. Your democracy is not fit for purpose. And this has been a long-running problem in modern America, that somehow it's managed to struggle on for 100 years and elect a president and a Senate and a Congress every so often. But nobody's looking into really these areas. What are the procedures? What are the processes? What safeguards are in place to count the vote? Do people have voting ID? Are the electoral rolls regularly checked to discount dead people, to discount people who've moved out of the States and so on? That I've been doing a bit of study on this, and I'm going to kind of put my ideas forward in a later date. But, I mean, the American voting system is not fit for purpose, and the democracy does not work. And for people to... it works if you pretend to ignore all the obvious problems in it. Yeah. And that's without even getting into the touch screen voting, which is a massive issue. This is voting on machines. Now, what happened was back in the 2000 election of Bush versus Gore, it all came down to one or two counties in Florida where they had machines that stamp a hole in the paper. And eventually it was called, and Bush won the election. But they passed an act called the Helping America Vote Act. And that passed in, I think it was 2002. And what that did was it mandated, it allowed new electronic touchscreen voting machines to be used. And they started to come in 2003 or thereabouts. And immediately there was huge problems, but nobody wanted to talk about this. Now, I got a book off the internet here called Black Box Voting: Ballot Tampering in the 21st Century. Now, this is a self-published book that was published by a woman who calls herself a housewife, a 52-year-old housewife. And she said, how come it's up to me, a 52-year-old housewife, to publish this, to expose these machines? And this is frightening reading. Now, this was produced in 2004, so that's 16 years ago. And she has, even in the short time that the voting machines were around, she showed how just simply vulnerable they were, not, well, to deliberate fraud, but also just to natural error. For example, these machines are not secure. You can literally take the back off them with a screwdriver. They're not secure physically. They're not secure remotely because they can be connected to the internet and you can access them that way. They're not reliable because, like any kind of machine, like our own computers here, they can freeze, they can break down, they can get shorted with the electricity. Their memory cards can corrupt, their hard drive can stop working. And they're also subject to human error as well, just like people programming them wrongly, people writing the wrong software codes going wrong. And also, like, the operator at the polling station sets it all up wrongly. I mean, they're just an absolute disaster. But being America, of course, what the Helping America Vote Act did was it opened up elections to the private corporations, and there was literally billions of pounds of money circulating, selling these machines to all the different state legislators. And she talks about that as well, and the corruption involved in that. You would get people buying machines for the state, and then that person who bought the machine would go and work for the computer company that created them. Things like that, all documented. And this was just like allowed just to chug on, and nobody bothered to look at it and say, we've got a serious problem here. These machines are given all sorts of crazy responses and results that don't make any sense. And then you'd have a democratic state that didn't want to address the matter because they all got in as a consequence of these machines, and it also worked the other way as well. There was Republicans who've been fiddling around with these votes as well, because you can contract the voting machine company to run your local primary for your local dog catcher or whatever. And so, with a little bit of money, you can make sure the right person wins. So, I mean, the American voting system is not fit for purpose. One vote does not count for one person anymore. And this has now all started to come out. And that's what we're seeing tonight. And it's all part of the anger that's going on, because there's simply the volume of evidence is so overwhelming. Now, the British media and the American media, they don't want to touch this because clearly that's revolutionary. If they say, yeah, actually, the American voting system doesn't work, sorry, we've been keeping that fact away from you for the last 25 years. I mean, you're going to have a revolution. Well, so the media doesn't want to talk up that. And the British media just want business as usual. They hate Trump anyway, and they just want to get Biden in and go back to the globalization world that they knew pre-2016. So nobody wants to expose it. So it's only people on the internet doing so against the power of social media. But it seems to be coming out. Because this can't go away now. This can't go away because Biden is going to be very bad for not just America. As you said, when America sneezes, we're going to catch the cold. And the Biden and Kamala Harris crew are real globalist revolutionaries, and they will end up destroying America. And basically, Donald Trump was saying basically all of this in his speech, which you can see at Right Side Broadcasting, which is how I watched it. And it's a serious matter. And I'll tell you something else, which I've discovered, which you won't believe. But the next London mayoral election, it was meant to be this year in 2020. It may be coming up this year in 2021. But Mayor Khan has contracted, and I've got all the details here, he has contracted the Smartmatic voting company, one of the ones that are responsible for the voting machines in America. He has contracted them to run the next London Assembly. And this contract was signed back in 2018, and they kept it pretty quiet. So we're going to start to get these machines now coming into our elections and essentially rendering our personal sovereignty, our one man, one vote, null and void. And so we're going to have to fight this. So this is a new battle for the future. It's basically the battle for democracy, and it's shaping up. And you have to choose your sides. And I know there's lots of well-meaning people who want to believe what they read in the papers. They want to believe the BBC. They want to believe everything they see, and everything's going to be okay. Yes, he won free and fair. I'm afraid not. We have a serious problem with the integrity of our vote, and voting integrity is going to become a big issue moving forward. Because if these guys get their way, then it's going to be like a George Orwell situation where we're all basically getting crushed under the boot constantly forevermore. But I do believe that people are beginning to wake up, and we'll just have to see where the cookie crumbles and where the cards fall.
Yeah. There's a term, there's a song out there, they call the song, "The dice is loaded and the good guys are losing." And, I'm reminded of those words, and I'm just looking there at Barbara Wilson here. Barbara, we can't change the rest of the world. We need to concentrate in our own country and sort it out first. Barbara, absolutely. And that's no matter what country that you're in, whether it's the United Kingdom, in Scotland, in Northern Ireland, in Wales, in England. We've all got our huge contentions and our huge battles to fight. But Barbara, this is the reason why we have these huge contentions, is because of what is happening across the world. And, for example, Barbara, if you're in Northern Ireland, the Sinn Féiners, they would be very, very closely aligned with the Biden camp, the Hillary Clinton camp, the Bill Clinton camp. And they would be closely aligned with those people. And as I say, they team together in order to derail our successes. And really, if what we need is that we need, and if our politicians won't help us, there needs to be an uprising of the people. There needs to be an uprising against this. And I'm not talking about an uprising to rack and to ruin, but an uprising to take back what is rightfully ours, rightfully, because people right around the United Kingdom, respectively, I mean, the land, the country, the place in where they live, it belongs to the people. It doesn't belong to the politicians. And we elect politicians to serve and protect us. But right now, that's not actually happening. So what I would like to do at this stage, Alistair, is I would like to go to, I've got a video lined up here. Saying it's a video, it's a live stream, probably. I don't know until I switch over. Now this won't go smoothly because this is something that I'm not used to doing, but I just want to give people a glimpse of what's happening in Washington DC right now, and then we'll come off, we'll have a quick chat about it, and we'll move on to what's happening in Scotland right now, what's happening in the United Kingdom, and what's happening in Northern Ireland from my own perspective. So I'm just going to try to share the screen here, and please excuse if this doesn't go smoothly, but we'll give it a go anyway. So bear with me.
All right, guys. Thank you. Keep on.
Sorry about this. Just bear with me for a moment there. I'm just trying to find. It seems to have snarled up there for a bit. So just bear with me. I'll go to another one here.
Right now, it looks like gone. Hopefully, I see a comment here pretty soon.
Okay, then this one.
Anybody make a comment or something? See one comment.
There seems to be too much freezing on it. I think we'll get ourselves back to technology when you need it, or when you want it to work. It doesn't work the way that you want it to work. But there we go, back on the StreamYard again. Sorry about that. I was just going to try to give you an example of what was happening right now in Washington, DC. But yeah, I mean, as far as we're hearing, I mean, what I was watching was the people, they're not amused, they're not happy. And who knows, Alistair, maybe this will be the straw that will break the camel's back. And maybe the Americans will take a stand. And maybe that's a cold I would like to catch, by the way. A cold where people stand up and people take back control and people demand that their democracy is returned to exactly where the founding fathers of America thought that it would be, or envisaged that it would be. You know, as I said at the very start of this here, and they talk about in America is the pursuit of, is it life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that's in the Declaration of Independence. And, you know, without, you know, life, you can't have life without liberty. You know, you not live proper life without liberty, and without liberty, you know, you obviously can't be happy. So let's hope that America return to being that, what was seen in the past as the land of the free, because as I say, when we do, no matter why we like it or not, a lot of things that come down our road started in America. And, you know, from here, from a Northern Ireland standpoint, I mean, they used to say that Northern Ireland was maybe 10 years behind some places, and maybe Southern Ireland got things before we did, and then it filtered on through. But really, I'm just crossing my fingers that common sense prevails in America, and people do begin to look at things properly. But do I believe that will happen? Well, probably not. Alistair, your own thoughts?
Oh, absolutely. Well, you're certainly right about the necessity for liberty. And one of the things that seems to be getting taken away from us right now is, in fact, our liberty in the sense of our freedom, and this is with the lockdowns. Now, of course, they'll say it's for our own good and so on and so forth, but we need to kind of wake up to what extent we're really going to be putting up with that in the long term, because they are taking away at the moment. We're here in Scotland, we are in a full lockdown, which you only go along with it to the extent that you want to go along with it, but obviously you can't go to school. Your children, they're talking about keeping children off school till at least February. They've closed the churches and places of worship. They are basically, throughout the United Kingdom, they're clamping down on freedom of speech in a very serious way. There's this thing called Speaker's Corner at Hyde Park, which is an iconic worldwide place in Hyde Park, where we used to, as Britons, be able to point to and say that stands as testimony to our freedom of speech here in this country. Now, if you try to speak at Speaker's Corner, you'll get bundled into the back of a paddy wagon, as they used to call them, and violently so as well. And this is like the United Kingdom, where we're meant to have freedom of speech, and where you're not actually disturbing anybody's freedom to move at all. You're just standing on a soapbox shouting out. But no, that's not allowed. So and of course it encourages surveillance, the surveillance state, and it encourages people grassing up their neighbours and things like that, things which are not normally considered to be British traits. Quite the contrary. So we are living through a very strange time where freedoms that we have come to take for granted, even just things like freedom of education and freedom of worship and freedom of speech and freedom of travel, that's another big one. These are simply just now they are contested. You've only allowed that in certain circumstances, and we, the government, led by Nicola Sturgeon, who will bring this in, and she brings it in without even talking about it at Holyrood. Now, Holyrood would, because they're all just like follow her anyway, they would vote for it, but she didn't even go through the motions of having a Holyrood vote on whether or not she should lock the country down. So we're living through situations here in the British Isles, which, as is much of the Western world, which is extremely unusual and ultimately really quite wrong. And the state will simply get away with what they can. There was an interview with Neil Ferguson, this guy who's the guy that's he's a serial wrong ideas guy. He always comes up with stuff and it's always proven wrong, but the system, the politicians and the media love him. He was the one who said we were all going to die of, what was it? I can't remember. Was it foot and mouth, or was it BSC, or was it swine flu or whatever? He always comes up, he always makes some grand thing, and it's always proven to be so wrong as to make sure he doesn't get a job in town anymore, but he just gets promoted for it. So he was interviewed by the Sunday Times, I think it was, or was it the Times, one or the other, just a couple of days ago. And he basically said that they looked to China and they were thinking about whether or not these sorts of highly restrictive policies could be brought in here. And then they thought, no, we wouldn't stand for it. The British people wouldn't stand for it. And then when they found out that we would stand for it, they brought in more. So he basically confirmed what we all know, which is that the state and the people that are running our lives in that way are just going to keep pushing to what they can get away with. And I think many of the people in the American Congress tonight thought they could get away with letting these strange votes get passed, and they discovered that they couldn't get away with that tonight. So that's an interesting thing. But until stuff like that happens, the politicians will always just keep doing what they'll keep doing, because that's their nature, especially if they are the ones that are running the show at the moment. So yeah, we're in a bad way here in Scotland, just as far as like human submission to the system is concerned. And how can we fight back against it? Well, we can fight back by talking about the importance of our liberty. The Americans have a national narrative that's built around liberty, that's built around the frontier West that's built around the the good guy sheriff and stuff like that. They have a story about liberty in a way that we British perhaps don't have so much. At least we don't tell it so much in the way that the Americans do. So the Americans have more of a spirit of liberty and more of a desire to push back, whereas we here in Britain don't necessarily have that narrative. At least we don't have it in a central way, in the way that the Americans have that narrative of liberty. So it's maybe going to take us a little bit longer to learn about it and to learn the importance of it. But when we learn the importance of the freedom of speech and assembly and travel and worship and so on, then we can start to push back against the anti-democratic forces. Because what are these people if not anti-democrats? Democracy is all about freedom of speech and travel and freedom to earn a living as well. Things like that have been taken away from us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Look, on that subject, I would just like to play another little video, and this is where a man in the Houses of Parliament, he had said that protest is the oxygen of democracy. And listen to how that he says that his own government were removing these freedoms from people. Well, I'll let you hear the video and we'll come back and we'll have a quick chat about that. But it's along the lines of what you were speaking about. And on the Neil Ferguson story, Neil Ferguson, he makes these wild and wonderful predictions. Didn't they cull a huge amount of cattle a few years ago as a result of what Neil Ferguson and his operation had been saying? But now what we've learned is that Neil Ferguson's operation is being funded by one of these institutes. Go look that up. That is the truth. So is it any wonder that he's in place? And who else is being funded by these institutes? Is Neil Ferguson's operation an NGO, a non-governmental organisation? That's what that stands for. But just listen to what this man has to say, Alistair, and then we'll have a quick chat about that. We'll go on to what's happening in Scotland right now, and then we'll bid our listeners good evening and thank you for joining us. But over to this one.
Sir Charles Walker.
Madam Deputy Speaker, our freedoms are like the air we breathe. They're fundamental to us as a nation and to who we are as its people. We are not asking our constituents to do anything we have never asked. We have coerced them. We have criminalised freedom of association, the freedom to go about one's business, the freedom to travel, and the freedom to protest. The freedom to protest. That is the oxygen of democracy. Our fundamental rights are our contract with government. I am living in fear of something much darker hiding in the shadows. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, when the sunlight returns, and it will return, I hope it chases those shadows away. But I can't be sure that it will. I cannot be sure. And that is at the heart of my anxiety and the anxiety of so many of the people I represent in this place.
Good man. What was his name?
I'll just play that again just to get his name. I think it's Charles Walker.
Sir Charles Walker.
Charles Walker. Yeah. He's worth contacting, Alistair. He's worth maybe trying to get him on our stream to talk about those exact words. And yeah, I think that's something that we must do. But just along the lines of what you were speaking about there, where he says that, we haven't asked people, we have coerced them. And you know what coerced means? Over to you. Give us a quick description of what coercion means and what to coerce someone into something means, Alistair.
To force them against their will to do something that they most likely did not want to do in the first place is how I would define it offhand. And we have certainly been coerced because and you look and say, well, how have they managed to do this? And one of the reasons is that just through misinformation, they've given out a lot of stuff that has in fact scared people to a ridiculous level. and and some people are very vulnerable these days to fear. You know, a lot of people do live their lives with a fearful attitude. I was talking about this last night on one of the live streams that I was doing at A Force for Good, you know, and to get biblical for a moment, it says that you should not live your life with a spirit of fear, but a spirit of power and love and sound mind. And that's 2 Timothy 1:7. And I thought that's an excellent summary of how you should actually go through life, with power, love, and sound mind. And a lot of people don't have that, unfortunately, and so they're very vulnerable. And we have to understand that, and we have to care for them, and to know that they don't have the wherewithal to not be afraid. They're easily scared, and so they've scared a lot of people in these kind of godless secular times. A lot of people have got very scared of invisible demons, as it were, in this case, the COVID. And so a lot of people have believed it. And so if you're going about going, no, it's that's just the government exaggerating things just so they can control you, people wouldn't really know what you meant. So they've been able to get away with that, and with just the sheer domination of the message, full spectrum dominance of the media, and rewards for people who promote their story. For example, if you're STV or YouTube or whatever, you're going to get a lot of money from the British government or from the Scottish administration or the Northern Irish Assembly or the Welsh Assembly. You're going to get a lot of money to run adverts on your platforms, in your daily newspapers. Nobody advertises in daily newspapers anymore except government sources. And they'll be paying thousands of pounds, tens of thousands of pounds a week to these papers. So these papers have no desire to change the tune, to change the channel. They're just going to keep pushing fear propaganda. And if Biden gets in as well, that fear propaganda is going to ramp up as well. So that's one of the ways that they've been able to do this. Is just through full spectrum dominance of the media upon a vulnerable population, many of whom have got hearts of fear rather than souls of power.
Yeah, indeed. And, you know, I'm going to make a comparison for you here, and I'll just tell you how bad that it has really got. But in 1995, Margaret Thatcher, she signed the Anglo-Irish Agreement here in Northern Ireland. And I can remember as a young man around the age of, I think I was 17 or 18 at the time. And I remember going to Belfast City Hall to protest. And there was over 250,000 people arrived in at Belfast City Hall. And, you know, it was such a sight to see that people from all parts of Northern Ireland arrived in. And they literally, not in our name, they were saying. But here today in Northern Ireland, I mean, we've just had an Irish or a North Channel border installed, otherwise known as the Irish Sea. And, you know, there's not a protest. You know, the right, as that man had said, Charles Walker, he said that, you know, the oxygen of democracy, the right to protest, has been taken away. And, you know, when's it going to return? He says that, you know, he talked about chasing the dark shadows away, but will the dark shadows go away?
Yeah.
Well, not if ordinary people don't stand up against this. And there will come a time, I am absolutely certain, I am absolutely sure that there will be somewhere, sometime in some place, a straw that will break the camel's back. And possibly that might happen in America over the next few days. And it'll raise up a movement of people that will begin to say, not in our name. It could take a while. It could take a while to happen. And if it doesn't happen now, just live in hope, because all we can do is be ready, willing, and able to take that stand when that time becomes necessary to do so. Alistair,
Well said. Well said.
just before we close, if you could just tell us, I mean, in Scotland, tell us about Scotland right now. I know that recently, as I say, that you've got a relative version of Brexit given to you. I mean, what's it like in Scotland right now? I mean, are the SNP annoyed over this? Are they clamping down in any way, shape or form that we should know about? Tell us what's going on in Scotland right now.
what's going on in Scotland is that we are being misled by I was going to say a one-party state. It's probably a one-person state, actually. The entire media is in hock on their knees to what I'm calling Big Sister, not Big Brother, from 1984, but Big Sister, otherwise known as the Dear Leader, Madame Sturgeon, who can do no wrong at all, and she has essentially no opposition. And in fact, the BBC reward her every day with a platform for her to speak for as long as she wants on the latest thought that has flitted across her cerebral cortex and which she needs to transmit to the world at large. And then after she has transmitted this fleeting thought, nobody is given a right of reply, and the questions are never like, why are you locking down? The question is, why didn't you lock down before? Or why don't you lock down even harder? You know, the media just follow her frame entirely. We're coming up to the Holyrood election, which will be on Thursday, the 6th of May, not very far away. I can see that being cancelled. You know, I can't see them saying, right, we're going to lift the lockdown in March and then we're all going to go to the polling stations 4 weeks later or whatever. I can't see that happening because, I mean, as you can guess, I'm very skeptical of this entire COVID thing, but I know that what would happen if we did that is a week later, we would find that the number of cases of COVID had risen by, 20 or 30 people. The media would go, there's a tidal wave of COVID now as a consequence of everybody going to the ballot boxes. And then the Tories would go, yes, see, I told you we shouldn't have gone to the ballot boxes. And Labour would go, we should never have had a Scottish election in the first place, and so on and so forth. And the utterly useless politicians who run us would just make things worse for us. So I can see that either being an all postal vote, again, which opens up a very dangerous precedent, or she cancels it and knocks it down a year down the line and we get another year of Madam Sturgeon. I know that she wants to do the latter because that will allow her to continue to be on the BBC for another year, and it will continue to allow her domination of the situation to get worse. But I don't want to just like give a tale of woe here. There's plenty of people who see through us, who see through what we're all facing, and so there's plenty of people who will, with organisation and leadership and so on, who will be able to set the country to rights one day. But at the moment, especially with the lockdown, where the right, as that gentleman Sir Charles Walker was saying, the right to protest has actually even been forbidden. The right to protest against what we're going through. The only way you can protest is to have like a one-man protest, and that's something that we're thinking that maybe this year we're going to have to turn a lot of events into that sort of thing. But we're going to get round it in some way, and we're going to make sure that our voice, the voice of common sense, the voice of unionism, the voice of being British, is heard as much as we feasibly possibly can in these absurd and dangerous circumstances that we're living through at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting that you say that that you can get around and you can do these things. That if you do it in a way that I mean, it can be very effective. I mean, I noticed that you've done something very effective just a few weeks ago when you covered up what was it, a monument of some description, and I think you've done that yourself and a cameraman, which was completely social distancing.
Yes.
So I mean, that's what we need to do. We need to get out there. We need to make our mark, and believe me, those type of things can actually. They serve to highlight issues in a way probably that mass protests actually wouldn't, and it keeps within their law, their guidelines. So yes, onwards and upwards.
Exactly.
For the new year, and your fundraiser, it's now at a close. Is that right, or it will be very shortly?
It is at a close, and it closed at it closed at 8 o'clock, just when actually I come on the show, and we've reached £8,605, which is pretty good. That's about 54% of our goal for what we need in the coming year. So we're very pleased with that. That's the biggest amount we've ever raised, and it'll all go to a very good cause. Especially we've got a team here of 6 people who work on our social media platforms, who work on our video editing, who work on our graphic design, who work on political outreach, and without whom we none of this would be happening. And we even had a very kind gentleman who created this lovely wooden flag behind us. And I want to just give a shout out to Caelan at Dramatic Scotland Creations on Facebook, and he does bespoke flags. He just did this one. We didn't even ask, unsolicited. We just received it in the mail one day. A fantastic bloke, and he does great Ulster flags. He showed me one that he did, which was an Ulster flag, half of an Ulster flag blending into half of a saltire, and he does this in Wooden Creations. Great British patriot. Totally on side on all the things that great British patriots are on side with. Sorry, I just thought I'd mention him there. That just came to mind. So yeah, we've got a great team of folk, a great load of supporters, and so grateful to everybody who helps and who has helped in that. And I know there's 1 or 2 people tonight watching the stream there. There's Richard and there's Jim, and I saw somebody else earlier as well who I know who have donated to us in their own various ways and are totally on side. So thanks guys as well for that.
Yeah, Alistair, once again, thank you for coming on this evening, and thank you to the people who arrived in and stayed with us, and thank you for the comments. And I'm going to say that from our own point of view here at Restore GBNI, Restore Northern Ireland, I mean, we have our own contentions here in Northern Ireland right now, as you well know. And what we'll be doing this year is that we will be the thorn in the side of our mainstream politicians, and that's those that we believe they're not doing enough in order to defend, protect, and enhance our place in the United Kingdom. And they pay lip service to things, but they won't actually get up of their backsides. I mean, I often say to them, get up off your knees, stop groveling, get up on your knees and do the things that people have put you in position to do. And I'm going to say that this year especially, that if they don't do what the people require of them, well, probably it's time that us, the people in Northern Ireland, we began to put people in place that will do what the people need and will stand alongside the people and will stand for the people and with the people in a way that the people actually deserve. Because for too long in Northern Ireland, Alistair, for too long in Northern Ireland, we have been let down by those that we have placed in leadership. And, in a way, those people have kept the people down. And they'll say, don't talk nonsense to me, and I've said that in the past. But the reality is that they play things and they do things in a way that keeps them in power and doesn't let anybody else get a chance. So, I mean, it's not hard to do. We will be standing against those people. On Monday evening stream, coincidentally, I have a man coming on. He's a man called John Tong, Professor John Tong. He's a professor of politics from the University of Liverpool. And I had the pleasure of meeting John in July of this year. And we spent the day together in a socially distancing manner. And we had a few beers and we had a good time, but we had a good chat, a real good chat about politics and about how politics should be, about how that the needs of people should be placed before the wants of ideologies. And we'll have an interesting chat on Monday coming. And Alistair, I'll recommend that John then comes to you and you can have a chat with John also, because he's I would say that he's like most professors these days, but he's a man with an open mind, and he's certainly a man that if you have him on your side, if you've ever any issues, it's always good to have an expert opinion maybe put into writing. And I would say that John would be a man that if he believed in the merits of an idea, he would certainly write you an academic paper in order to get your whatever it is that you're doing put on an agenda somewhere or in the media. So he's definitely a good man to know, and he's well worth, as I say, sticking with. So, I mean, that's what we're going to be doing over the next year. We're going to be talking to more and more people like John Todd. With another man that we've already asked to come on the screen, and he's agreed, and this will be a big one for people. But this is a man that was attached with the Clintons and attached with our friend Mr. Blair. And this man, he was a professor who works for the UN and also is within the top 4 of the George Mitchell Institute for Global Peace, which is a construct of Bill Clinton and George Mitchell and Tony Blair and all of that mob. But this man, I mean, as he said to me, John, I profoundly disagree with you. He says, but I would be happy to come on the screen and have a debate. So it'll be a very interesting debate, because whenever we've met before, whenever we've talked, I have to say we haven't quite seen eye to eye. But at least what it does is it lets you see what it is that's driving the world nowadays and what it is that's happening within our world. So that's something else that I look forward to. And I would appeal right now to politicians far and wide, our own politicians here in Northern Ireland, politicians in England, to come and have a chat with us and begin talking to people. And if you don't agree, and I know from the bottom of my heart, Alistair, as would you know, that there's many politicians that couldn't possibly agree with what they see coming down the track right now. And I would ask those politicians that, speak out. There was a man called Ted Cruz this evening that I was watching on Al Jazeera. He's a man that's on Trump's side. And what was he asking? Here's what he was asking the Senate. He was saying, well, you see, when there's so many people out there, half of the electorate that actually think that voter fraud has taken place, well, then probably the best thing to do would be to have an audit of it. A forensic audit of it. Let's look at it and let's prove to those people, well, it did happen or it didn't happen, but under no circumstance does those Joe Bidens of this world and Kamala Harris's of this world, under no circumstances do they want that to happen. They would rather drive a country apart. They would rather destroy democracy for everybody, and they would rather, it's like some of these left-wing ideologues, like Nicola Sturgeon, it's like Michelle O'Neill's in Northern Ireland, and some of these Naomi Longs of this world. But these people, I mean, they wouldn't care why this country fell apart and was at war. They wouldn't care. And they, as long as they further their own, I'm just going to say, wicked ideology. So it's good night from me, Alistair. If you would just like to say your good nights, but stay on the screen whenever we finish, and we'll play us out with our theme tune. But over to you to say goodbye, Alistair.
Yeah, thanks for having us on again. Another interesting chat. We covered a lot there from especially personal freedom, I think, and personal sovereignty, the importance of the vote, not just for the individual, but also for the nation. And it's going to be up to people like ourselves to create the new ideas that are coming forward, because I think we're witnessing the end. It's going to be a slow end, but the end of the order that has misgoverned us for the last, maybe even post-war, but certainly for a long time, certainly 25 years or so. So it's exciting times that we're living through. There's always hope, and it's always darkest before the dawn, as they say. So yeah, absolutely. Till next time, and thanks everybody for watching, and thank you very much for the comments. And we're at aforceforgood.uk, Facebook, Twitter, Parler, Instagram, and YouTube.
Yeah, and whenever you say that there's always hope, you've just prompted me to lift a little plaque here, which I'm going to read from. And they call this plaque "Don't Quit." I mean, that's exactly the spirit that we need to have right around the United Kingdom. And it says, when things go wrong, as they sometimes will, when the road you're trudging seems all uphill, when the funds are low and the debts are high and you want to smile, but you have to sigh. You never can tell how close you are. It may be near what seems so far. So stick to the fight when you're hardest hit. It's when things seem worse that you must not quit. So playing us out with our theme tune. Thanks very much.
Absolutely.
Thanks to everyone for joining us.
just across the Irish Sea, stirs a heart of loyalty, raising honor and indignity, drives the will to keep us British free. Not alone are we on this journey, for in a land just across the sea is a hand that reaches out in friendship, and a bond that's lasted centuries. And its hands across the water, reaching out for you and me, for Queen Ulster and for Scotland, help to keep our loyal people free. Let the cry be no surrender, let no one doubt our loyalty, reaching out to the brave red hand of Ulster is the hand across the sea. Cross the water, reaching out for you and me, for Queen and Ulster and for Scotland, help to keep our loyal people free. Let the cry be no surrender, let no one doubt our loyalty, reaching out to the brave red hand of Ulster is a hand across the sea, just across the Irish Sea, stirs a heart of loyalty, raising honor and dignity, drive the will to keep us British free. Not alone are we on this journey, for in a land just across the sea is a hand that reaches out in friendship, is the hand across the sea, is the hand across the sea, is the hand across the sea.
I do not agree with so much of what Tony Blair stood for. Not just Iraq, Europe, many other things. If ever there was a moment to call for a government of all the talents, much as I don't like Tony Blair, he does get things done. He does command respect. He is seriously bright. Why not get people like Tony Blair involved to help us solve a national crisis?